Welcome to our standards implementation webinar. This is our last of 4. Just for your information items, we recorded one of them. I think we recorded the August 2nd, and then we'll be recording today, and then a version of that will be posted shortly for your use and reference. Another thing is that we will operate today without our cameras on so that we get a clean recording without a square on top of the slide somewhere, so the slides are unencumbered. My name is Todd Driver. I'm Director of Content and Curriculum for Superintendent Ibarra here at the State Department of Education. And with me today is Elena Knopf. She's my ELA coordinator. Kathy Bills, my mathematics coordinator, and Andrea Bearwald, our science coordinator. And they will be going through some specifics and highlights of changes that were made that will help you know where to pay attention. Today we will be reviewing the documents that support educators implementing the 2022 standards in the English language, arts, and literacy, mathematics, and science. And we'll be walking through specific changes, like I just said, by subject and aligned to the specific recommendations from our legislators. And then we will take some time at the end to answer any questions you may have to make sure that you go away today with complete clarity. So these are the 4 documents here that you see on your screen that we have been working on. All are posted right now on our standards page, except for the, I think it's the reference. Which one is it? They're all posted. Okay, that is new. Yeah, so just recently, so that's good. So there's a standards highlights document that we've had up for a little while. This is what I talked about as some of you were at our post-legislative tour, what I was talking about and what we were handing out at that tour. And this is designed specifically for the superintendents and stakeholders to clarify what the intentions were of the legislature and how we responded. Gives a high-level overview for the educational leadership. And the standards reference, this is really designed for instructional leaders and teachers, and this will show how the new standards can be translated to the standards used in the majority of your curriculum. The standards progressions is, again, for the leaders and teachers, instructional staff, and that shows how the concepts unfold. In other words, your progressions, your vertical alignment. The standards booklets are currently printed. They're with Alexander Clark. Just due to the nature of the scope of this review and the significant change, there has been a lot of call for standards booklets. However, there was not the money that was allocated, and so we have had to put a restriction based on percentages of your district size and need. And so right now, at this point, there is a limited number, and you can find that number for your district on our website and the instructions on how to order from Alexander Clark. Of course, we do encourage you to utilize the PDF. That is free. You can print whatever you need and want off of that. You can also contract straight with Alexander Clark or any printer, if you like, to have them printed for your district. Okay, so to help you find where those standards live, you go to our sdeidaho.gov website. On the landing page, you'll need to scroll down to the bottom. So you'll scroll past Superintendent Ibarra's picture down to the bottom. Then on this picture actually shows our content and curriculum tile on the second row. Typically on the landing page on your computer, it'll be on the very left row. It's the bright orange tile, says content and curriculum. You can get to the standards that way, and I'll show you that in a second. Or at the top of the page, just to the right of Superintendent Ibarra's picture, there is in red, says Idaho Content Standards. That'll take you directly there. So once you click either one of those buttons, if you click the content and curriculum tile, it'll take you to the content and curriculum page. Then either at the bottom of that page, there'll be a tile that says Idaho Content Standards, or to the right in the gray sidebar menu, there'll be an Idaho Content Standards. You can click right there. That will then take you to this page here, the Idaho Content Standards. You can see in that, like it's a blue box, isn't it green? I think it's a green box is the way it'll show on your page. And it'll give you specific directions on how to order hard copies from Alexander Clark. and what your code is. I've had some questions on that, on what my code is. The code is listed right there for districts. Keep in mind that this is for public districts, and anyone else, higher ed or private schools and such, and charters, you need to work that out yourselves. Charters are free, excuse me, I misspoke. Hope I didn't cause a heart attack out there for some of you. All right, so what that'll do is you want to scroll down to the bottom of the page. You will see expandable gray menu bars and all the content areas. You can see there, just for example, we have expanded the English language arts literacy, and you can see where the content standards are there and then the supporting documentation below it. And so at this point, that is where you're going to find your support resources. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Elena. She's going to go through the specifics of the highlights.
Good morning, everyone. As Todd mentioned, I'm Elena Knopf. I'm the English Language Arts Literacy Coordinator in Content and Curriculum. I'll be going through the documents that Todd mentioned are available to you on the website. The first one that we're going to talk about for ELA is the highlights document. This document is laid out in such a way that you'll see the recommendations that came from our legislature on the left side, and on the right side, you'll see how that recommendation translates into our 2022 adopted standards. A few highlights here to bring to your attention: the foundational reading skills now aligned to the state comprehensive literacy plan. K2 writing standards have been reduced per the recommendation that came from the legislature. An additional recommendation around balancing fiction and nonfiction led to the removal of the reading list from the appendices in the ELA standards. Total number of standards for ELA was reduced significantly, and there were many verbiage changes to make sure that the standards would be understandable by parents and all stakeholders. Additional recommendations from the legislature for English language arts, this content area had the most, was to review classifications of literature and informational text, and as a result of that, the substrands were renamed to literature and nonfiction. Looking at the CCRAs, those were removed. We reevaluated the categories of reading, writing, speaking, listening. As a result of that recommendation, you'll see the standards are now organized into 7 strands and 19 substrands. Some of the standards in literacy, history, and social studies, literacy in science and technical subjects, those were removed. To ensure the adequacy and progression of cursive writing, the cursive standard was carried through grade 6. And lastly, looking at the standards for conventions, the changes that you'll see there is now a grammar and convention strand, in addition to substrands that run K-12, grammar and usage. The next document I want to share with you is the reference document. This document has been provided so that you can see the 2022 English Language Arts content strands next to the 2017 Idaho Content Standards. When you get into your curriculum, we also have provided for you in this reference document the code for how you might write the strands in our new English Language Arts standards, as well as the grade bands. So when you write these standards for English Language Arts, you'll start with the grade level, you'll put a dot, the strand code, a dash, a substrand code, a dot, and the standard number. The next document that we've created is a K-12 standards progression document. For English Language Arts Literacy, what this document will do is it will provide you with a strand or substrand. On your screen, you see textual evidence as an example, where you can see the standard from kindergarten all the way through grade 12. So you have that vertical K-12 progression. Also on your screen is a sample of volume of reading to build knowledge under vocabulary strand, and you can see that K-12 progression. Questions regarding English Language Arts, literacy standards, or the documents we've provided for you? If you do think of a question, please type it into the chat at any time. We can go back and answer content questions even while other content areas are sharing their documents. I will pass the presentation over to Kathy.
Hello, everyone. We're excited to talk to you about this implementation today, and I'm going to go through the same 4 documents for mathematics. Again, we have the highlights document, which really will help you with messaging because it doesn't have a lot of details about the actual standards, but it gives. I'm just going to walk through this, and you can pull it up on the website, or you can just look at the slides. So one of the biggest concerns of the legislature was that our former standards did not specifically say when basic facts should be. They were in the old standards, but they were very buried within like a standard or within a cluster. So the new standards, you'll see something called mastery standards on each grade level overview. If you want to go ahead and open your standards document and look at your grade level overview, you'll see at the bottom, it'll say if you're a K-6 teacher, what basic calculation needs to be at that grade level. There's also in that front matter of each grade level, there's some guidance on what it means to master basic facts. And that fluency is not just memorization, but it's about thinking and knowing relationships. Really great guidance on there for each grade level to be able to read and also share with parents. Another big recommendation of the legislature is that we make math as relevant as we can in our standards and show more examples. So one of the things that the work groups did was they added Idaho-based scenarios, which will make our standards different from any other state because some of our list towns in Idaho or Idaho problems we're trying to solve. There's and water towers. There's some great things that sort of give it an Idaho feel on the application of concepts. There were a lot more examples added throughout the whole document, and they are highlighted with blue boxes. So whenever you see a blue box, you know it's an example of the standard. They also requested that we reduce the number of standards, but that was not accomplished. The working group felt that reducing the number of standards conflicted with the interest of adding clarity. So as you know, some of our old last version of our standards, they had really long standards that were like a so they broke some of those up into a standard with sub-points and sub-bullets. So that they did that to get more clarity and clean up some of the verbiage. So the numbering, they maintain numbering as much as possible. So if the standard was on something like finding, reworded it, but they kept talking. Multiplication with 2-digit numbers. So the coding should be pretty simple. Most of the teachers on the groups K-8 did not feel there were too many standards. High school groups acknowledged there's probably too many standards, but they felt that we needed more time and more input from high school before we talked about it. High school person, stay tuned, there's more work being done. Another request from the legislature was reducing complex verbiage. The working groups had a lot of discussion about this because some of the verbiage was necessary for instruction and really important on the mathematical end. Some of the verbiage they did try to make more friendly to a non-math audience. So if math vocabulary was listed still in there, then they felt that it was important. Another thing that they were asked to do was prioritize the concepts. Moving closer to the speaker. The mastery standards helped do that for each grade level, but we also went a little bit further and they coded the K-8 standards to be the major work of the grade, the supporting work, and the additional work. There is a typo on the slide. The codes look different in your document. It's a square, a triangle, and a circle. But if your district is using prioritized standards or essential standards, The working groups looked at a lot of different sources to be able to code these. So really, they also hopefully will eventually be aligned to our ISAT targets, but the major work of the grade would pretty much be your essential or priority standards, and then they're supported by the additional standards and the supporting standards. It doesn't mean that you don't teach supporting standards or additional work, but you can use that major work of the grade as sort of the umbrella, and then you can integrate your supporting standards and your additional work into those major work of the grade. So it's just about what you're emphasizing. It's not about not teaching it. Yeah, at the 9 through 12 level, they coded standards that they felt were above the 9th and 10th grade level would be coded with a plus sign. And modeling standards, things that you can teach in a context and they can create a model or give it a modeling application, were coded with a star. Pay attention at the high school level to those plus sign standards. Age and grade level appropriateness was another concern of the legislature, and that was examined by looking at other states and multiple sources in the learning progressions, and they didn't really change a lot, but they mostly just reworded and gave clarification statements to explain how far a student should go. So for example, sometimes concepts didn't necessarily need to be mastered, but they wanted to be introduced with like using objects or pictures or models, but not necessarily getting to the standard algorithm. So throughout the document, you'll see pink clarification boxes, and that's where they were trying to address that age and grade level appropriateness with some greater clarification. There's just, if you open up the standards document, here's some things to take a look at. On page 11, you'll see the progression of the K-8 domains. Page 12 will give you your format and your code for each grade level. Grade level introductions are really important. You'll see a change in those standards for mathematical practice are actually written by grade level, and you'll see what standards for mathematical practice would look like for 3rd grade versus 8th grade, and they worked pretty hard on those. Like I talked about the major work of the grade being coded at each grade level overview, and then those are some things if you walk through the document to just take a look at. The most important document for teachers, if you are an instructional coach or an instructional leader, you want to just print, I would recommend looking at this document, the reference document, with your teachers, because they are going to want to know, how did the standards at my grade level change? And that's what this document will give you. It'll tell you for each legislative concern what actual standards for each grade level are reworded. Most of them are reworded, not removed or changed. And then there's a few that were added, and those are also highlighted in this. This is a really important document to read if you're an instructional leader or a teacher. You might recognize this progression of K-8 domains. This graphic was in our last standards, and they kept it. They felt that this progression was very research-based, and as much as possible, they tried to maintain its integrity. So the standards document is still organized around the same domains, and the content of each grade within the domain has remained the same. The progressions document is probably going to be a very useful document for anyone doing intervention. It'll also help you with dealing with learning loss, because you'll be able to provide just-in-time intervention by looking at within a concept, like multiplication and division is the example on the slide. If you're a 3rd grade teacher, you can look back at what 2nd grade students should have known and whether your kids know it or not. So if they don't know it, then you would want to provide a just-in-time lesson to maybe remediate that, to get them caught up. And then it'll give you, if you have advanced students, you can look at the 4th grade standards and push them towards that next level of complexity with the content. And so this progression would go all the way through 8th grade. You'll be able to see how multiplication and division are applied in the middle school level, so if you're an elementary teacher. And if you're a middle school teacher, you can look back to elementary grades and see where your kids might have some holes that need to be explained right there in the middle of your lesson. This is a great document to just print out and have available as you're planning. The progression document is organized around the domains from the chart. So you can see the table of contents. We tried to keep that integrity of that. Do you have any questions about math? We do have a frequently asked questions document from these webinars that we will be posting after the webinars, and you'll see some of those commonly asked questions that you can also download. So it'll be where we have these slides.
Hi, my name is Andrea Berwald, and I'm going to walk through the science documents that we have. So we have the recommendations, the highlight document. The recommendations from the legislators were putting the supporting content back in with the performance standards. Previously, these had been separated out and sometimes were on the back of a page and forgotten, so they're all within the performance standard now. They also wanted to balance politicized content, so the standards were rewritten to avoid or focus on positive rather than negative aspects. And then they also looked at the age appropriateness for the standards. So some standards were moved at the elementary level, and then others were just adjusted to make it more appropriate for the grade level they were in. Go through a couple of examples of each of those highlights. So in the old version, you had the performance standards all listed together, and then the supporting content was separated out. This is a second grade example, so everything was on the same page, but as you got into middle school and high school, a lot of times that supporting content was kind of put aside. In the new version, you'll see the performance standard, and then right underneath the performance standard is the supporting content that goes with it. They also rewrote how you identify the standard, so you are going to start with the grade level now, then the science domain, the unit you're in, and the standard. Still includes the further explanation and the assessment limits. Some of those were modified or changed to make them more appropriate for the grade level, but they all are still in there with those performance standards. Here's an example of a balanced solution. I have highlighted, these are the same standards at the high school level. I've highlighted the changes that were made. So you'll notice instead of examples for limiting future impacts, we changed it to solutions, just to make sure that we are balancing in positive and negative impacts that are happening. And then in the example, we really tried to go through and give Idaho examples. So in the old high school standard, it talked about altering global temperatures by making large changes to the atmosphere or ocean. And while the ocean is an amazing place and I love visiting, it is not close to Idaho. So we changed the example to such as cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is something farmers in Idaho, ski resorts are all interested in. So it's just bringing that to a more Idaho-based example of what we're talking about with humans. Throughout the grade levels, wording has been changed to emphasize humans can both help and harm the environment. We want to try to be solutions-minded. Many times when we're talking about human impact, it becomes gloom and doom and everything we're doing wrong, which can be very defeating. So just trying to make sure that we are including things that humans are doing and things that humans can do to help the environment in order to keep that balance there. For age appropriateness, an example of changes that were made are in the kindergarten level. The old standard said to plan and conduct an investigation. Most kindergartners probably cannot plan and conduct their own investigation by themselves, so the new standard simply says with guidance and support, plan and conduct an investigation. You'll see throughout the standards just trying to make it a little more reasonable of what we're expecting of our students. There are probably things teachers were already doing in order to support their students, but now it's clarity of what is actually happening. There were four standards that were moved from one grade level to another, so you can see those on the screen. Many of them were just moving from one spot to another. The ISAT is given at 5th grade, for science, and so all of these are still within, before that first time of the ISAT test being done. The committee looked at what skills students need in order to succeed, what other content outside of science is being taught that the grade level could connect with, and then how it flows with the other science content in them. We have also created learning progression documents. These progression documents have the content and what that looks like from kindergarten up through the high school level. This is an example from life science, from molecules to organisms, and what that looks like for each grade level. We have also in the progression document done a progression for the scientific engineering practices. So you can see what does it mean to make a model for a kindergartner versus what does it mean to develop and make a model as a high school student. Did the same thing for the cross-cutting concepts, so you can see from kindergarten level, what do they expect with patterns, up to what are they expecting with the high school. It's going to be very important for teachers to be looking back and seeing what their students should be coming with, and also looking forward at where we want them to be as they're moving into. We also created a reference document so that if you are reviewing curriculum, books, or your teacher and you're on Teacher Pay Teacher looking for materials, you can look at the National Standards Code and see what would be a similar Idaho standard. In this document, there is one circled in highlight for characteristics of life. That's because there isn't a national standard for that. This is an Idaho-specific standard. So we tried to match it up as best as possible so that when you're looking for materials to use in the science classroom, they probably are going to have the Idaho standards listed on them, but you can figure out which one would match up best with what you're trying to teach. Any questions for science?
All right, thank you all. So I'm sure some questions may occur to you later. Do not hesitate to reach out and ask any of us, or look for that FAQ to be posted. We will also, again, just as a reminder, we will be posting this webinar for your reference. Some additional standards and resources that are planned. There's going to be developed here over the next few months an instructional guidance document, and then actually up right now and is a dynamic and live resource, is the Parent Resource Toolkit, what we call PRT. That you can actually access right now, and this will help your parents with ways they can support their students. So here is our contact information again. You can see all four of us there. You can also go to our website and click on the content and curriculum page and find all the content area coordinators and myself there. And you can get connected with us. And one thing I would like to bring out is on our landing page, there is a place for you to request professional development. You can either request something that's very specific, or you can also find events that we have planned, that we have developed in response to what the field is telling us is needed. We have a question. Where is the Parent Resource Toolkit located on the site? Boy, you would ask me that. The way that I get there is I just type it straight into Google, PRT, is it org or gov? Okay, it actually is on the front page, the landing page. Thank you for that. I just have it bookmarked, and so sometimes you get lazy and you forget exactly how you got there initially. So on the landing page, the PRT connection is right there. In fact, I'd encourage you to test that right now, make sure we answered that correctly so you go away with the right information.
Another question that has come in, is there a document with only the focus or power or major standards, or do we pull them out of the standards document?
They're not in that format as of right now, so that would be up to you at this point. And the question was, I don't know if you heard the question, but are there priority standards pulled out of the document at this point, or power standards, or whatever your district is calling them at this time? And no, that is not there at this point. On the question on PRT, the Parent Resource Toolkit, it seems that the link is not there. It was at one point. we need to rectify that situation. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. That is actually a problem. Okay, we did find it. It's hidden though. So under educational resources, so if you scroll down the page, in between the tiles and the superintendent's message, there is an icon that you would not necessarily know is a button. It says educational resources, and it is located there. That is in our opinion, right here, right now, live, thinking out loud, that is a strange location. So we will fix that. We'll make that easier. All right, there's no further questions. Again, feel free to reach out to us with any questions that may occur to you later. And we thank you for attending, and let us know how we can support you in your work. Thank you for coming. Have a good day.